In this episode, I want to talk about a brand that went from launch to $1 billion exit in less than 3 years. And I want to show you that the thing everybody credits for that exit, the gummy, is not actually the reason they won. The reason they won is that the gummy was not just a format. It was a mechanism of hope. And once you understand the difference between a format and a mechanism of hope, you will look at your own product in a completely different way. The brand is Grüns. And in April of 2026, Unilever announced they were acquiring it. Reported price, around $1.2 billion. The company launched in August of 2023. So that is launch to acquisition in under 3 years. It is one of the fastest exits this category has ever seen. This is part 4 of a mini-series called What the Winners Got Right. Each episode takes one of the fastest growing and highest valued supplement brands of the last decade, pulls it apart, and shows you the psychological lever underneath the surface story the industry tells about why they won. If you have not listened to the earlier episodes yet, I would go back and start at the beginning because they set up the framework we are using across the whole series. But if you are jumping in here, you will still get everything you need from this one. Okay, let's get to it. Welcome to Health Business Mastery, the Creative Thirst podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Hewitt. So let me give you the full picture of what Grüns actually pulled off, because the speed of it is genuinely hard to believe. Chad Janis founded the company in 2022, and the product hit the market in August of 2023. By the second year, the brand had surpassed $300 million in annual revenue. They had over 1 million customers. They were shipping around 10 million gummies a day. And during a Series B round in 2025, the company was valued at $500 million. Then in 2026, Unilever came in and acquired them at a reported $1.2 billion. And Unilever did not buy Grüns in a vacuum. They already owned Oli. They already owned Smarty Pants. They already owned Nutrafol and Liquid IV. So when Unilever buys Grüns, that is the same company that bought the brands we talked about 2 episodes ago, deciding that Grüns was the next piece they had to have. That tells you something. The people who have made more money acquiring supplement brands than almost anyone looked at Grüns and saw the same pattern playing out again. Now here is the story everyone tells about why Grüns won. They put greens in a gummy. People do not like mixing powders and chugging green sludge every morning, so Grüns made it taste good and easy, and people stuck with it. Gummies are hot. Taste matters. End of story. And all of that is true. But it is not the insight. Because if the whole thing were just gummies plus taste, then any competitor could copy the gummy format and win. And plenty have tried. The gummy is the visible part. The thing underneath it, the thing that is actually hard to copy, is what we are going to spend this episode on. Let me define the thing at the center of this episode, the mechanism of hope. Hope is one of the 4 supplement buying forces. It is a pushing force. It is what gives desire the energy to actually convert into a purchase. The way I have always described it is that desire by itself is weak. Someone can want to be healthier for years and never do anything about it. Hope is what propels that desire into action. Hope is the belief that this time, this specific thing, might actually work for me when the other things did not. Now, the mechanism of hope in my framework is the part of your product or your story that gives the prospect a logical reason to believe it will work this time. It is the missing piece. It acknowledges that their past failures were not their fault, that the previous solutions did not address the real issue, and it introduces the thing that was missing. Most of the time in the supplement world, the mechanism of hope lives in the ingredients. It is a unique blend, a patented form of something, a delivery method, a way the ingredients work together. It is usually a science story or a process story. That is the conventional place to build hope. Here's what Grüns understood that almost nobody else did. For their buyer, the mechanism of hope was not in the ingredients at all. It was in the format itself. Let me explain what I mean. The Grüns buyer did not fail at greens because the greens did not work. They failed at greens because they could not stick with the routine. They bought the powder. They used it for a week. The taste was rough. The mixing was annoying. The cleanup was a pain. And the tub ended up shoved to the back of a cabinet. The failure was not a failure of efficacy. It was a failure of adherence. So for that buyer, what is the missing piece? It is not a better ingredient. They already believe greens are good for them. The missing piece is a format they can actually maintain. And that means the gummy is not a format decision. It is the literal mechanism of hope. It is the thing that gives the buyer a logical reason to believe that this time will be different, because the specific reason they failed before the misery of the powder has been removed, that is the whole game. Grüns took the mechanism of hope, which usually lives in the science, and they moved it into the experience. And because they did that, the format was not just a nice to have. It was the core of the sales argument, whether they ever articulated it in those terms or not. I want to point to something the founder said because it confirms this read exactly. When the Unilever deal was announced, the framing that came directly from the company was that Chad Janis founded Grüns after recognizing that the supplement industry's biggest barrier was not awareness. It was adherence. People already knew they should be taking their greens. They were just not doing it. Sit with that for a second, because it is a remarkably precise statement of the problem. He did not say the barrier was that people did not understand the benefits of greens. He did not say the barrier was that the science was not good enough or the ingredients were not strong enough. He said the barrier was adherence. People could not stick with it. That is a hope problem stated in plain language. When a buyer cannot stick with something, what they lose over time is hope. They start to believe that they are the problem, that they lack the discipline, that they are just not the kind of person who maintains a healthy routine. And once a buyer believes that about themselves, every new supplement they encounter gets filtered through that low hope lens. They look at your product and think, sure, but I will probably just stop taking this like I stopped taking everything else. Grüns solved that by removing the thing that was killing the hope. The format was so easy and so pleasant that the buyer could believe, maybe for the first time in a long time, that they would actually keep doing it. The gummy gave them their hope back. Not hope in the ingredients, hope in themselves, hope that they could be a person who actually maintains the habit. And that is a far deeper and more durable thing to sell than a better formula. Because you are not just promising an outcome. You are giving the buyer permission to believe in their own ability to follow through. That is one of the most powerful things any health product can do. Now, some of you who listened to the last episode are going to say, wait, this sounds a lot like AG1. All-in-one daily nutrition, easy ritual, replace the complicated routine. And you are right that there is overlap. But the distinction between what AG1 did and what Grüns did is important, and it is worth being precise about. A G1 led with a belief reframe. They changed what the buyer believed a healthy routine should look like, from many things to one thing. The lead force was belief, and the identity shift was the engine. Grüns led with hope, and specifically, hope delivered through format. A G1 is still a powder. You still mix it. You still have to build that into your morning. A G1 won on the belief that one thing replaces many things. Grüns won on the hope that this format is one you can actually sustain because the act of taking it is genuinely easy and even enjoyable. Think about who each one is really speaking to. A G1 speaks to the optimizer, the person who wants their foundation handled and wants to feel like a high performer who has it together. Grüns speaks to the person who has tried and failed, the busy parent, the wellness rookie, the person who bought the powder and quit, the person whose hope had been worn down by their own track record of not sticking with things. Those are different buyers and different forces, even though the products look similar on the shelf. And that is exactly the point of this whole series. The surface similarity hides the psychological difference. Two brands can sell what looks like the same thing and win on completely different forces. If you do not understand which force you are actually pulling on, you cannot build marketing that reinforces it. Here's where I want to save you from a very expensive mistake, because the lesson from Grüns is easy to misapply. A lot of brands are going to hear this and think, great, I need to put my product in a gummy. And that is exactly the wrong takeaway. The gummy is not the lesson. The gummy was the right mechanism of hope for that specific buyer and that specific failure. The lesson is that you need to find the mechanism of hope that matches the actual reason your buyer has lost hope. If you just copy the gummy because Grüns did it, you are doing the same thing supplement brands have done for decades, chasing the visible tactic instead of understanding the psychology underneath it. And by the time you launch your Me Too gummy, the format is no longer novel, it is no longer a believable mechanism of hope, and you are competing on taste and price against a brand Unilever just put $1 billion behind. So instead, do the real work. Ask why your buyer has lost hope, and get specific because the answer is different for every product in every market. Maybe your buyer lost hope because every product in your category takes weeks to show any result, and they have quit before week 3 every single time. In that case, your mechanism of hope might be an early signal, something they can feel in the first few days that tells them it is working. So they stay long enough to get the real benefit. Maybe your buyer lost hope because they have been burned by products that overpromised and underdelivered, and their hope is gone because they no longer trust the category to be honest with them. In that case, your mechanism of hope might be radical specificity, telling them exactly what to expect and when, in a way that is so precise it could only come from someone who actually knows. Maybe your buyer lost hope because the protocol was too complicated and they could never do it right. In that case, your mechanism of hope is simplicity. The same lever Grüns and AG1 both pulled in their own ways. The format gummy is just one possible answer to one possible reason for lost hope. Your job is to find your buyer's specific reason and then build the mechanism that speaks directly to it. That is the part that is hard to copy. That is the part that builds a real brand. So let me give you the practical work to take away from this episode. I want you to write down the single most common reason your customers stop using your product. Not why they do not buy, why they stop. Go into your subscription cancellation data, your churn surveys, your customer service tickets, and find the number one reason people quit. Because that reason is almost always the place where hope dies. And wherever hope dies in the usage of your product is exactly where you have an opportunity to build a mechanism of hope in your marketing and ideally in your product itself. Then I want you to look at your sales page or your main ad and ask a hard question. Where in this marketing do I actually address the reason my buyer has lost hope? Not where do I list ingredients, not where do I make my promise. Where do I specifically acknowledge that they have tried things before, that those things failed them, that it was not their fault, and that the reason this is different is the specific missing piece I am introducing. If you cannot point to that moment in your marketing, you are missing the mechanism of hope. And without it, your desire and your trust elements are firing into a buyer whose hope is already on the floor. And then the bigger, harder question: can you build the mechanism of hope into the product, not just the copy? Grüns did not just write better hope copy. They built the hope into the format itself so that the product delivered on the promise every single day the buyer used it. That is the most durable version of this. When your product itself is the mechanism of hope, your marketing almost writes itself, and your retention takes care of a lot of your economics for you. Because remember what high retention does for your business. It lifts your lifetime value, which means you can afford to spend more to acquire a customer, which means you can outbid competitors on traffic and still be profitable. Grüns solving the adherence problem was not just a marketing win. It was the engine of the entire business model. People who stick with the product are worth dramatically more than people who quit. And a mechanism of hope that keeps people using the product is, in the end, an economic advantage as much as a psychological one. Hope is one of the 4 supplement buying forces. It is the energy that turns desire into action. And the mechanism of hope is the part of your product or your story that gives the buyer a logical reason to believe it will work this time. By acknowledging why it did not work before and introducing the missing piece. Grüns built a billion-dollar brand in under 3 years by recognizing that for their buyer, the missing piece was not a better ingredient. It was a format they could actually sustain. The gummy was not a format decision. It was the mechanism of hope. It gave the buyer hope, not just in the product, but in their own ability to follow through. And that is why it worked. And that is why Unilever paid what they paid. Do not copy the gummy. Find the reason your buyer has lost hope and build the mechanism that speaks to that specific reason. That is the lesson. Next episode is the last brand in this series, and it is the one that is doing something different from everyone else. IM8. The force we are going to look at is trust. IM8 is making a bold bet that there is a segment of the market ready for a supplement brand that talks to them like they are serious about longevity science, and the way they are building trust is a masterclass. We will also get into what a celebrity co-founder actually does psychologically, beyond the obvious answer of reach. I will see you there. And before you go, if your brand has reached the point where a course or a coaching program is not really the answer anymore, and what you need is a team that lives and breathes supplement marketing to come in and do this kind of mechanism and positioning work alongside you, that is exactly what we do at Creative Thirst. We take on a small number of brands at a time, and we are selective about it. If that sounds like where your brand is, you can apply to work with us at creativethirst.com.